quick video. We had a question posted on one of our sword videos about closing distance. If you saw our last sword video, it was all about distance and how to manage that. And one of our followers asked us an excellent question. He commented on the fact that he had been struggling with sort of the same thing, but in empty-handed combat. Now, empty-handed bridging distance can actually be even a little bit more difficult than in sword combat, because as we saw with sword, the wrist is a vulnerable target. So as long as our weapons are about the same length, then really I can always get to my opponent's wrist to help bridge that distance. In empty-hand combat, this is not always the case, because sure, I can punch a guy in the hand, but mostly it's just going to annoy him. I really need to be able to get into the body to get to the vulnerable parts to really enter into empty-hand combat. So the question becomes, if you're fighting a taller opponent, how do you cover that gap? Now, it would be great if I had a significantly taller opponent. All I have is Matt, so we'll make do. Matt is slightly taller than me, however, not by a lot, but I imagine his reach is a little bit better. Just hold your arm out, Matt, like straight out. So Matt's got a little bit of reach on me, just maybe an inch or two, so not a lot. It would still be an obstacle to overcome, but we can still talk about the principles of bridging distance in empty-hand combat. Now, every style is going to do this a little bit differently. Different styles have different ways to approach difference, and different styles use different distances. But in Tai Chi, we typically like to fight from very close. Tai Chi is done mostly with bent arms. There's a lot of body contact, a lot of grappling, and a lot of short, sharp movement. So we really want to be in this distance anyway. So bridging distance is a big issue in Tai Chi. And there's a couple ways to go about that. So if Matt and I are squared off for empty-hand combat, obviously I need to get to the inside, and what I don't want to do is just say, oh, I want to be in Tai Chi distance and walk over here and try to get there, because on the way in, Matt is probably going to pop me right in the face. And that's no good. So there's a couple things I can do to try to bridge distance. Now again, very much like in sword combat, what I want to do is I want to think about how to get from here to there. And I want to do something in the middle. And I'm going to show you a couple different things that I can do. First off, I can just lightly engage the hands, because since this isn't boxing, a little bit of grappling is okay. I can actually come in and try to engage that hand and move in. I can actually use that lead arm as a little bit of a shield, which really, if you're working against a tall opponent, can give you even a little bit more of an advantage, because they've got a lot of arms to use as a shield. Now the thing to note here is I don't necessarily need to grab, control, and push this arm, because if my opponent is taller, they may have some leverage against me. And I don't necessarily want to push that big long arm out of the way. What I can do is I can just really quickly engage and move up that arm. And what that's going to do is that's going to make it difficult for him to use that arm to engage, because I've already covered that a little bit, and it's going to make it a little bit harder for him to hit me with that other hand. Now, he can try to strike in underneath, but he doesn't have a lot of leverage because I've got control of his shoulder. And I can also keep this elbow nice and sunk, so that if he does come in, he's just going to catch some arm rather than getting into the rib cage there. So that's going to bring me in close, and then I can try to do whatever engagements I want to do from up tight. The other thing I can do is I can chase a jab. Now, this doesn't necessarily work perfectly as far as a jab goes. You think a jab is the goal is to get that quick shot out there and strike your opponent with it. That's not necessarily always the case. There's a lot of things you can do with a jab. And obviously against a taller opponent, if we're here, if I throw a jab when I'm far enough away that he can't hit me, I'm not going to hit him either. But what I can do is I can use that jab to conceal my movement, because if I pop a jab out there in his face, what he sees is a whole lot of fists. Now, I don't know if you've seen Kung Fu Hustle, but have you ever seen a fist that big? So I can pop that out there, and he's going to have a tough time seeing me around that fist, and that's going to give me a split second. Now, most people, when they think of jab, they think jab and retreat, and I've gained very little from that. But what I can do is I can pop that jab out, and I can fold myself in behind that jab. And that may buy me the time to get in close. Now, if your opponent's cagey and paying attention, you still have to be careful, because you can get hit for that, especially if he engages that jab and follows that up. Which leads us into the last thing I'm going to talk about as far as closing distance. And this is something I work a lot with my students on, which is going to be yielding forward, an advancing rollback in Tai Chi. And the idea there is I'm going to assume that he's going to try to hit me on the way in, and I'm going to be ready for that. I'm going to have my hands up, my hands ready to engage. And as I come in and as he starts throwing those punches, I'm simply going to yield those out of the way and use that to close that ground. Now, if we step back this way just a little bit so we've got a little bit of room to travel, so you can kind of see this, Matt's actually going to give a little bit of retreat, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to advance in, and as he backs up to keep the distance open, he's just going to keep throwing punches, okay? So as I come in, he's going to start throwing punches, and he's going to retreat as he comes in, and I'm going to yield those off, and that allows me to close that ground. Now, obviously we did that very slowly, that wasn't a live combat demonstration, but if you practice that enough, you can do that very quickly, and what's important to that is that I'm going to keep my hands mostly on my center line, and I'm going to control the center line, because as soon as I lose control of the center, and he's got access, I'm going to get hit in the face a lot. That's not a good thing to do if you're in empty hand combat. That's usually the antithesis of what you're trying to accomplish. So I want to make sure that I'm controlling the center line, moving from the hips, and keeping his energy to the outside, which is going to allow me to close. And if I combine that with some of the other techniques, potentially popping that jab out there, maybe covering the arm a little bit, and then yielding, what we get is, here's Matt and I squared off. I'm going to cover this arm a little bit, come in, he tries to hit, I'm going to block it now into the inside. Or, we're here, I'm going to pop that jab out and start to fold in with it. He sees it coming and tries to hit, but I'm going to yield in with that, and now I'm to the inside, can execute my technique. Now, once you're to the inside, you have the advantage against a taller opponent because their arms are longer and they're to the outside. So getting the inside can be a great advantage if you're a little bit shorter, but you got to get there. And there's a couple ways that you can do that. I hope that helps out. I hope that answers your question. Keep asking them because we love it when you send questions to us. If you haven't asked us a question yet, throw one out. Obviously, we're willing to answer. Okay? Click like on this video so everybody knows what superstars we are. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our great stuff, and we'll see you guys next time.